I'm Michael Shapiro, your host on Interplay, Conversations in Music. Today I have my favorite person in all of the choral world, and that's Deborah Simpkin King. Hi, favorite person in all the choral world. How are you?
I'm well. How are you, sir? It's a
Thank you.
delight to be here.
Of course, we've seen each other many, many times since, and I've been to your wonderful concerts with. First, it was called Schola Cantorum of Hudson, but now it is known as Ember, which is a semi-professional course, which is absolutely outstanding. And you perform new music. So us composers just love you. Talk about Ember, the title. Where does that come from?
Well, as you know, as you just said, we performed under a lengthy Latin name for a number of years. And it's not an inappropriate name because it literally means School of Singers, and then on Hudson, meaning the Hudson River. And here we are on either side of the Hudson, located in both Jersey and New York. And School of Singers we are. But we found that people stumbled over the name and it suggested a sacred kind of underpinning, and that's not at all who we are. So we thought about it and thought about it, and after 2 or 3 years of playing with different names that would feel like we could sing under that name, the name Ember came up. And I think it stuck and resonated because it has so many different meanings and different connotations. It indicates warmth, brightness. There's an element of danger that goes with it. The fact that you can blow on it and it brightens up, lightens up. That's the use of breath, the shared breath. So many things about the word ember just seemed like, yeah, that's who we are. That's where it came from.
Well, when you blow on it, it flames, right?
It does.
I'm amazed about your conducting because, the concerts I've been to and also just talking to you about it infuses every particle of your being. Could you go back a little bit and tell me, I know you're a wonderful conductor, extremely expressive. The music informs you, and then your body and hands and eyes and everything moves. And you inform the music through those motions. But if you would go back in time, part of the thing that I do on these broadcasts is ask people about their backgrounds. And how did you get started in choral conducting?
I started out really as a singer. I needed to sing. I needed to express, and began studying voice. And little by little I had a marvelous, all the way back to middle school, marvelous middle school teacher who had a girls' choir. And after middle school, there were 5 of us who just kind of stuck together, and we made our own arrangements. I was living in Texas at the time. Made our own arrangements, kind of traveled around Texas singing at various kinds of events. She continued to work with us, and I was smitten with the ensemble art. I didn't know those words at that time. I didn't know to call it that. All I knew is it was just a great time, and it seemed like it was something important that was happening within us. And then when it came time to look for a school, to go to undergraduate school, I went to a workshop that was offered by my church at the time to the adult church choir, and I was singing in that as a high school student. And the clinician was Beverly Henson, who at that time was the director of choral activities at Texas Christian University. And I was quite taken with what he did, with the energy that he brought, and the specifics of how he would dive into a score and let the voice of the composer. Hopefully, if Bach isn't really very available for us these days to talk to directly, but there's a lot that we can learn from his scores and how he would interpret that. And of course, Bev studied with Julius Herford. Enough said in terms of the musicological background there, and the depth of all of that. I didn't know at the time that I would be doing a PhD in musicology. Goodness, that was a decade in the future at that time. But the whole thing seemed to kind of come together. The use of the voice, in which my first mentor took me in that direction in a very holistic way, Karo Karapetian, and I owe him, anything that I do vocally is his product. Wonderful instructor, and not just a voice, but also a powerful choral presence as well, and also a musicologist. So
I know
I
about him,
had
as you know, because his son, I think, Carapatian,
uh Ara,
narrated Peace of Mind with the Houston Symphony.
yes, Ara Karapetian still
That's right.
lives in Houston. Yeah, that's one
Amazing.
of his two sons. Yeah,
Oh my.
yeah.
Uh,
So,
yeah, please.
I had some giants on whose shoulders I chose to initially not stand, but ride and learn and grow and become increasingly convinced that this was where I needed to be. And I did go through a period in my early 20s, late teens, early 20s, when I thought, what am I doing waving my arms around when people can't put food on their table and can't balance their checkbook? And, maybe there's something more meaningful that I can do. And I really went through some pretty difficult soul searching around it and came to recognize that, we each have our vehicle through which to make an impact in the world. And mine was not so much the spoken word, but mine is definitely the musical word. And that's what I'm here to do.
It's certainly clear in your conducting and in your leadership in the choral world, which I'm going to get to in a few minutes, about your writing and also your administrative leadership.
Mm.
Let's go back to Ember.
Okay.
Ember is how many musicians at this point?
Well, we have a roster of about 50 singers, and we tend to perform in a non-COVID year, one side or the other of 30 singers. In September, when we performed with 17, and a week from today, the 18th of December, we will perform with 14 singers.
How are you going to do that? Please explain. People are interested.
Yeah, well, we have. I have really followed the science of, as we're learning more and more about this disease and how it is communicated. Of course, we're talking about COVID. This is for reference of the people who are watching this 27 years later and don't know. Um, right. Um, it's, and of course, singing has been deemed a super spreader event. And this is disheartening news to those of us who are singers. And there was, a major study that was done, and all kinds of dire predictions that came out in June of 2020. And I was on that initial seminar when it was presented live. And of course, then it had a life after that and circulated electronically and so forth. And then there was a follow-up study that did some real specifics, not just, gosh, when we sing, aerosol spews out and that's a horrible thing. But, okay, when a singer singing in this manner sings, unmasked, it goes this far. The droplets hang this, all kinds of specifics. And so we learned a great deal by the time we got to mid-August. And there was what they called a round two study. That they presented the documentation of. They presented it at that time because a lot of people were going back to school. I mean,
Right.
we're in New York, right, where basically life shut down for months. But around the country, that was not the case, and certainly not in August. And yet there was real concern. We're going back into classrooms, be they orchestra halls,
Right.
with wind instruments playing, be they rehearsal halls for choirs. What are we doing, and how can
Mm-hmm.
we protect the students and the
Mm-hmm.
teachers?
Mm-hmm.
So they said, what data we have at this point, let's make it available, knowing
Right.
that the studies are ongoing.
Yep.
It's yet inconclusive, but there were some things that they knew. And so following that science, knowing what we know now about what kind of fabrics, what kind of weaves of those kinds of fabrics provide filtration at what levels, we designed a mask, a singer's mask, and there are a number of singer's masks on the market at this point.
Wow.
But I have not seen one that meets the specifications or exceeds the specifications that were laid out in that round two study. There has now been an update, a round three of that, came out, I guess, about 3 weeks ago. And basically the data has not changed that much, but I need to study it more thoroughly to be able to really say much about that. But we developed a mask, has 5 layers, one of which, the middle of which, is a removable MERV 13 fabric, which is like a HEPA filter. And
Wow.
it slides into the mask. The mask itself is washable, has 4 layers, and it has that pocket in the middle in which the MERV 13 filter is inserted
Hmm.
and can be removed and UV cleaned in between uses. And so we sang, that was a big part of our protocol, and then we developed other protocols as well.
But you're singing together, wearing the mask, and
That's
you're
correct.
wearing the mask.
Correct.
And there's no muffling of sound?
It's kind of amazing. We have a little video from the event.
Uh-huh.
You could, listen to it. It's about 4 minutes long. And
And
of
your
course, we
website name is, again?
Ember. Yeah. Oh, the website itself is emberensemble.org.
There we go.
Yeah. Uh,
Wow. Well, that's wonderful meeting this pandemic with singing. What a
well,
nice metaphor.
there are so many wonderful electronic creativity projects going on, and you see little tiles with singers in them and all kinds of fabulous things going on. I have great deference for that. I think that is part of the answer to how we get through this time. And I have put my energies on finding ways of keeping live singing going when it can be safe, and yet making sure it's safe. Nobody wants to take undue risks.
No, not at all. Let's go to the selection of repertoire.
Okay.
You conduct Mozart, mostly Mozart. You're a guest all over the place doing all kinds of so-called traditional rep. Plus, you have worked in churches for many, many years that I've known you as a church director of music. In some places called a minister of music, some director of music. But you're a great organist, and you work with choruses in that circumstance. You've had concert series in Jersey of your choirs in the churches doing so-called traditional and new rep. But Ember is meant to do what?
There are two things unique about our programming. One is we work almost exclusively with living composers. Not completely exclusively, but almost exclusively. So that's one thing. The other is we will take on a theme and pursue it through a year. Not just theme a particular concert, but an entire year around whether it's a concept or an event or something we feel needs to be looked at pretty seriously in our society. One example is last year we chose the concept of listening because we felt that we were not doing that well in our world. And the first concert in that series, for example, was called Civil Discourse because we felt we were lacking in that. That was this time last year.
You could do that next year too.
We
You
could
could do it right
probably
now.
stick with that. We could probably stick with that.
Oh my God.
And we did a year on the World War I
Yeah,
Armistice Centennial
I
Anniversary
remember.
and so
I was
forth.
there.
So those are two things that are kind of unique about how we program. And we interact with our composers very directly. Our home rehearsal environment, where we're not now, because it's too small for us to be able to be in that context and socially distance. We have to be in larger spaces where we can spread out more. But in Opera America, where we normally rehearse, we have a big screen TV with access, and we bring our composers in from all around the world and interact with them directly. And the
It's
singers
wonderful.
really thrive on that, really enjoy that. I do too. I love it.
So where will this new pandemic okayed performance be if it's not in the small church? Where are you doing it?
Well, this one is going to be in a small church,
Oh,
but no audience.
ah, a
So
broadcast.
it's entirely a live stream, and this is the first for us. So, ask me later how it turned out.
It'll be
Uh,
fine. You're a great
but
conductor. It's
but
very simple.
we spread out. I was in there with my 7 foot long rope, between a post-it note on the floor for that singer, and 7 feet away, and spreading out around the room, fully using the space. And there is a technology that has been installed in the room by an organization called Musae, MUSAE.me. And they do a 360 VR experience, and they even will provide free glasses to allow people into a fully immersive experience.
Wow.
So we'll see how that turns out, but we're doing that a week from today.
Choral immersion.
Yeah,
Another part of choral immersion is your writing, and you are a major proponent in choral journals and other places of the promotion and identification of new work.
Mm.
And Project Encore is a brilliant program that you've been instrumental. Can we say choral mental? I don't think instrument. Tell
Just
us
some
about
kind of mental, I don't
some
know.
kind of mental. Tell us about Project Encore, please.
Well, Project Encore came out of, as with everything I do, it came out of a need that we identified, and it actually came out of the same organization that Ember lives within, Schola Cantorum on Hudson. We were approaching our 15th anniversary. The organization is now 26 years old, so this was back a decade, a little bit more than a decade. And we were thinking, well, 15 is kind of significant. We need to make a little bit of a to-do over ourselves. What can we do that really speaks to kind of honoring, celebrating who we are and what we do? And by that time, we had become increasingly known for working with living composers. We didn't kind of hang that out as part of our identification yet, but we did it a lot, enjoyed that a great deal. And so we thought, well, let's see what we can find in terms of programming little known works through the year, throughout the year. And of course, my board looked at me like I had three heads, which they were right to do. They said, who is going to come to concerts of unknown music, unknown composers? So, okay, we agreed on a thread throughout the season that included that, and specifically of works that had received a premiere, but that had not gotten serious traction in the choral world. And the reason that was a bit of a bee in my bonnet was that we had premiered a wonderful Latin Mass setting, very dense harmony, not easy to do, fully a cappella, many parts. It had gone very well, and the composer asked, could I use the recording of this from the concert and shop it around the world, see if I can get other performances. Well, admittedly, that was a bit of an esoteric work, but it's a wonderful work. 3 years later, he finally got a nibble. And that's a long time for a really wonderful composition to sit on the shelf. And he was being very proactive. He was writing to Kapellmeister all around the
I
world.
know.
He was sending, you're a composer.
I'm an expert on this.
Yeah, it's the second performance syndrome, and composers all know about it. But conductors, we're just kind of going along
Well,
performing
to
wonderful
throw a
pieces.
name out, I had
Mm-hmm.
this conversation with William Schumann,
Mm-hmm.
and he said, just write and let it be, and then it'll happen or it won't. But make sure you write it. Because
Yeah.
he spoke about his own symphonies. Peter Menon used to complain to me bitterly that he couldn't get a second performance.
Yeah.
And these are established names at that period, and it's quite true. Deborah, these are issues. Let me talk to you about the choice of repertoire. You do a lot of different things
Oh yeah.
in not only in Project Encore, but also your choice of repertoire. What are you looking for in a choral work that you get from somebody for the first time, whether you know the person or not? What are you looking for specifically?
It has to move me as a human being. And there's no doubt that that's a very subjective response because we're all moved by different things. I think probably early in my career, it would have been a very accurate accusation,
Ah,
if I should use those words, to say that I was a very cerebral person, very cerebral professional. And, Schenkerian, where I think I even have a Schenkerian book up here behind me on analysis.
mm-hmm.
And I could get into all of that and just, understanding and pulling apart a score,
Right.
and could get very involved and engaged and enthusiastic about the technique of a score and how well constructed it was, and on and on.
That's right.
And I still can. But that will not necessarily lead me to perform a score. I have to be moved by it. Now, if it's a composer I know, and I have a piece that comes to me and is just kind of like, Yeah, that's going to be awkward. I just don't quite know what to say. I will give it a few more listens, and often it does make its way into me, and I have to work a little harder at it, at finding what it is that can move people. Assuming I find it, if I have to work at it quite a bit, then I can sell it to my singers, and through them, that score can take life with an audience.
Now,
But
when
if
you
I
say you,
can't,
yeah, go ahead. If you
but
can't,
it, yeah, if I can't find that, if I can't connect with the message of a score,
okay.
I have no business performing it.
Well, true. And it's sometimes it's not immediate,
That's right.
which
That's
is
right.
problematic because you see so many things, time-wise.
Well, that yes, I mean there. Ember, as you referenced, we do many different things. Sometimes we do very esoteric things. Sometimes we do, well, our September concert, for example. This was the first time people were hearing choral music since the pandemic began. It's the first time we were singing together. We needed feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And that was pretty close to a Pops concert. It wasn't exactly,
That's
but it
okay.
was very lightweight. And I love doing that sort of thing. There's an immediacy to it, and it's right there. People are just charged by it.
No question. And you mix these things up in any concert.
Yeah,
It's not just we're having all steak and pudding straight through for 4 courses.
that's right.
You have a
That's right.
great dessert, and you have maybe something substantial, and you have the Vorspeise before, and you know what to do. But that comes from you being a great showman too, you know.
Oh, it's fun to dabble.
Well, you more than dabble. It's brilliant conducting. I mean, to watch you work and the way you move your hands and your body and your eyes, and you get everything out of them. It's just great.
Oh, thanks.
Now, to conclude our too short conversation, choral singing is community.
Hmm.
It's being together, which now, I mean, we're friends. I haven't seen you in a long time, personally.
Yeah.
And community of choral singing is not only tied to the secular, it's tied to the religious.
Hmm.
The churches and synagogues being closed and or limited in number of people. It's very tough.
Hmm.
Do you think there's a future, though, in broadcast choral singing? I mean, for example, with going to church or synagogue right now, a lot of people going. Many more people are going. I'm hearing from clergy than they used to get because people are tuning in
Hmm.
through Zoom or Vimeo or whatever.
Hmm.
Do you see anything new coming out of this madness?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, for one thing, the church that I serve right now, we will never again do services that are not made available electronically.
Yes.
And so people who, their greatest contact with a church they used to go to all the time, maybe they're elderly, was getting maybe some flowers, once every 5 or 6 weeks or something. The church would do. Now they can go to church every week with the rest of their congregation and see people that they know, and see their sanctuary and so forth. We will never again not do that. And I can tell you that for sure because quite a bit of money has been put into equipment to make sure we never again don't
That's
do
right.
that. But
Are you
even in
are you
this,
playing organ electronically too? I mean, how does that work?
well, we've done a variety of things from the beginning of the pandemic. Initially, we completely shut down the church. Nobody even went in the building at all.
Hmm.
And we did the church service from 3 locations, well, 4 locations, each of the 2 pastors,
Hmm.
my living room, and the studio of the person who was running the
Yeah,
Zoom
putting it all
technology
together.
and
Yeah.
putting it all together. And, we got increasingly fluent with it, and that we did that for quite a while. And then as of late August, early September, I guess, we had an outdoor worship service where people were together for the first time. That was quite a moment.
It would
And
be.
it was live streamed. Yes, it was. But it was totally outside, of course. And then in middle October, we began to have indoor worship, limited numbers, as dictated by the state. But the protocols were so daunting that I was frankly surprised that anybody would want to come. But we had as many as we could take. People
What's
had to sign up in advance and so forth. But we, the worship leaders, again, the two pastors, myself, and the technicians in the back, we did the service to a very sparsely populated sanctuary. We are
beautiful?
now back to empty sanctuary live streaming. So, at this point, we've kind of been through the gamut and we're fluent and flexible with a variety of mechanisms.
Well, I'm hearing this from clergy across the board that I've been talking to. It's what I've been calling a lovely dedication.
Well, and my choir we haven't missed a Thursday night. That's their rehearsal night. We meet on Zoom. They do things they tell me they just sound wonderful. And of course, I can't hear a thing. But then we rehearse music. They send it in to the man who mixes it, who happens to be my professional tenor. And we come out with an anthem. So we produce an anthem out of that choir every Sunday. This particular Sunday, we're doing the
That's your
Gibbons.
church choir, yeah.
That's my church choir. We're doing the Gibbons. This is the Record of John, which
Oh,
is, that's so we're keeping it happening.
oh my! Oh, I love those Elizabethan composers. They're
Yeah,
everything to me.
yeah, yeah.
Well, you're everything to me in the choral world. I'm just
Oh,
amazed with the work that you do. I
oh,
really
thank
am
you.
amazed in so many, many, many ways with Ember, with your guest conducting of all rep, with your writing, with your promotion through Project Encore, with your administrative work as the head of local choral groups, administrative groups of many choruses coming together under your
You're
guidance
talking
and
about
leadership.
the New York Choral Consortium.
Yeah, of
That's
which
what you're
I
talking
think,
about. Yeah.
aren't you the chairperson of that?
Yes, that's my honor to be. Yes.
I mean, all of these things add up to a presence that Deborah Simpkin King has in music, which is a blessing to us living composers and to
Uh,
Bach. So, Deborah Simpkin King, thank you for being on Interplay with me.
well, it's a great joy to be with you, Michael. I look forward to when we can sit across a table from each other
Wow, that
again.
will be amazing.
That will be amazing.
Well, again, thank you for joining Interplay. I'm your host, Michael Shapiro.